All right, good evening, everyone. Let's begin. So we are in Meretz Hashem, returning back to our true mission of learning Sefer Tehillim in Meretz Hashem, at least for the next little bit till we get closer to Chanukah. Then in Meretz Hashem we'll transition to Chanukah for a couple of weeks. But I want to draw your attention to what I think is a really incredible kapitel. So the truth is I'm going a little bit out of order in Sefer Tehillim, and I'd like to actually go back a little bit to kapitel Nun Vav, chapter 56. And what we're going to see is in Meretz Hashem, like in all of David HaMelech's kapitlach, that there are so many different layers of messaging contained in Sefer Tehillim. You know, again, I usually at the beginning of every, no, I don't know what the word is, not semester or zman, whatever it is. I always give like the same introduction to Sefer Tehillim, which is, I don't think I did it this time, but it bears just a moment of reflection. That David HaMelech, when we are first introduced to him in the Navi, is identified as a young man with beautiful eyes. Beautiful eyes, Yifeh einayim v'tov ro'i. Beautiful eyes and very handsome. What's of course incredibly intriguing about that is that throughout Tanakh, men are never described by their eyes. Only women are described by their eyes, the first time being Leah Imenu. Now, by the way, once we're on that, because we're coming up to these parashios soon, so remember again, the pasuk tells us, when it introduces us to Leah, tells us, Eine Leah Rakos. So again, all of us are used to the understanding of Rashi, right? How does Rashi understand that pasuk, the Eine Leah Rakos? How would you translate it? The eyes of Leah were soft, weak, swollen, right? So Rashi HaKadosh brings down the idea, because remember again, people used to say, Rivka has two sons, Rivka has two sons, Lavan has two daughters, the oldest son will marry the oldest daughter, the younger son will marry the younger daughter. So Rashi says Rivka spent her whole life hearing that her shidduch, right, her bashert was Esav. So she cried. So everyone knows Rashi, but I want to point out something very interesting to you, which is Rashi is the minority opinion on that pasuk. And in fact, the way most of the Mefarshim understand that pasuk is Eine Leah Rakos means Leah Imenu had exquisitely beautiful eyes, which is fascinating. She had a softness of the eyes, a beauty of the eyes. And in fact, what the Torah is doing is contrasting the beauty of Rachel and Leah. That as much as Rachel was Yefasma, she was beautiful, Leah was also beautiful. And in fact, Leah possessed an element of beauty that surpassed Rachel's. They were both beautiful women, but Leah had this component of beautiful eyes. Beautiful eyes. And what's interesting is go down a number of generations and you find that Leah's great-great-great-great-grandson, David HaMelech, who comes from Shevet of Yehuda, who's one of the sons of Leah, is defined with the same characteristics of his alter baba, right? Of his great-great-grandmother. And again, if you think about it, you know there's an expression, the eyes are the window to the soul. I don't know what the origin of it is, but I'm convinced that the origin of it is Leah Imenu. Because the idea of Leah's soft eyes represented the idea that Leah possessed a depth which was exceptionally profound. And if you think about it, again, it's not a shir on Leah Imenu, but if you think about Leah Imenu, what was her greatest accomplishment? Leah Imenu knew that she was not the chosen wife, right? She knew it. Who could imagine living with a sense of pain like that, right? Knowing every single day that you're not the most beloved wife. Again, in general, existing in a home with multiple wives is a little bit hard to contemplate, right? How exactly that works, right? In other words, how does it work to have more than one wife? The answer is, it doesn't work, right? In other words, there's not one story in Tanakh that works well. Think about this just a moment, right? Avram, Hagar and Sarai, disaster. Okay, Yitzchak is only married to Rivka. Yaakov Avinu with Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, literally a disaster. It's a disaster from beginning to end. But what's incredible is that Leah possesses incredible personalistic strength to be able to accomplish her life mission of building a family, of building Shvatim, even when dealing with daily personal pain. That's a depth. Those are the beautiful eyes of Leah Imenu. And David HaMelech has those same eyes. And the reason why it's important to say this, and I repeat this every single time, is because when looking at Sefer Tehillim, you have to realize that Sefer Tehillim is looking into the eyes of David HaMelech. It's looking into the eyes. And what would you see when you looked into the eyes of David HaMelech? What you would see is profound depth, layers and layers of depth, layers and layers of personal meaning, profundity to the Davidic personality. So that's why when we learn Sefer Tehillim, if you notice again in any one kapitel, we could spend months on one chapter of Tehillim. Right? You spend months on one. It takes me literally 30 seconds to read it. So why does it take me months to learn it? Because again, as we know that every line and every phrase is filled with so much profundity. So with that, let's go back to Kapitel Nun Vav, chapter 56, and look at the following. Number one, David HaMelech writes as follows: Lam natseach al Yonas elim rechokim leDavid michtam be'achos oso plishtim begat. Now this is one of these great kapitlach, because from the beginning, you look at the first pasuk, and what's the problem? What's the problem? The problem is, I don't no idea what it means. No idea what it means. By the way, even the English is not exactly helpful over here. For the conductor, Anyonas elim rechokim, David a michtam. So again, purposely left those phrases undefined because, again, we're going to see they're subject to so much dispute as to what they mean. Here's what we know. What does lam natseach mean? Lam natseach? To the conductor. Which conductor? Good. The conductor of the Levitic choir. Remember, again, I've mentioned this also before. David HaMelech wanted more than anything to build the Beis HaMikdash. He wanted more than anything. But Kadosh Baruch Hu told him he's not going to build the Beis HaMikdash for whatever the reason was, not our topic for tonight. He was not to build the Beis HaMikdash. So David HaMelech does anything and everything he can besides build the structure. He purchases the real estate, and he composes the music to be sung by the Levitic choir. So I'll tell you something amazing. Whenever you see Lam Natseach in Sefer Tehillim, that means this is one of the kapitlach which was sung by the Leviim in the Beis HaMikdash. So you have to take that in for just a moment, right? Because we yearn every single day for a Beis HaMikdash, even though we don't know what a Beis HaMikdash is. Right? We have no frame of reference for it. But I know my neshama knows how badly I need it, and I yearn to connect to some vestige of the Beis HaMikdash, something of it. You know, my wife and I were in Eretz Yisrael the other week, and on Shabbos morning, there is a beautiful minyan which takes place inside of the tunnels. They built a shul inside of the tunnels, and the truth is, it's right next. You know, if you walk into the tunnels a little bit more, you know, they have the spot which is the closest space to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the closest space to the Holy of Holies. I have a particular time of that because, again, women have taken over that space. Right? As a man, it is impossible to get near that space without getting some type of dirty look, although I did it on Shabbos. I just put my towels over my head. It worked. Right? So, again, it was incredible. So I was sitting there davening in the morning, on Shabbos morning, literally inside the tunnels, just feet away from the spot of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And I realized that, like, the feeling that I was feeling was like a tipa shebatipa, was a drop of probably what my ancestors felt like when they stood in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. So there are things that we know that we yearn for. I don't even understand what it is that I'm yearning for, but I know that I want it. So it's just incredible when you read a kapitel like this, when you see Lam Natseach, and you realize that we have the privilege tonight to learn something, to learn a kapitel which was sung by the Leviim in the Beis HaMikdash. What an incredible point of connection that is to our beautiful Beis HaMikdash. So, okay, let's analyze. Lam Natseach. So first thing we know, now by the way, was every single kapitel sung in the Beis HaMikdash? No. So what does that tell you? If something is sung in the Beis HaMikdash, what does that tell you? That it's special. Good. In other words, that obviously David HaMelech felt this was not just important, but it was super important. So important that the Leviim had to build it into temple service. So even before we delve into this, even before we know what David HaMelech is talking about over here, I know that there's something here of dramatic importance. All right, let's go on. So Lam Natseach, to the conductor. Al Yonas elim rechokim. So again, it's not quite clear how to go ahead and translate this phrase, so we'll leave that. Michtam. Also not clear exactly how to translate michtam, but here's what we do know. Be'echoz also plishtim begat. When David HaMelech was taken captive, or literally encircled or held on to by the plishtim, in Gat. Okay, so now, what's also beautiful is often in Tehillim, David HaMelech will link a particular kapitel to a specific life episode. So this kapitel, David HaMelech tells us, this kapitel came to me when I had my episode with the Plishtim in Gat. What happened with David HaMelech and the Plishtim in Gat? So if you skip to number 3 for just a moment, so you know this story, give you a little bit of background. David HaMelech is coronated by Shmuel, right, as king. There's only one little problem, which is there was a king, Shaul. To compound the problem a little bit more, the king, Shaul, was also David HaMelech's father-in-law. So you speak about in-law trouble. Right? David HaMelech now is king, and essentially he's taking his father-in-law's job. Now remember, David HaMelech has no interest in being king. No interest. Didn't apply, didn't ask, would do anything to get out of it. This is often the mark of great leaders. They don't want the cover, they don't want the honor, they don't really want the responsibility. So David HaMelech just doesn't say anything. Shaul begins to realize the meteoric rise that his son-in-law is having, while at the same time, Shaul is losing his grip. Remember again, Shaul was a tzaddik, but his tragic demise was really anchored in his failure to eradicate Amalek, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu had commanded him. So David HaMelech is rising, right? Shaul is declining, and Shaul becomes convinced that David is the root of all evil, actively seeking to usurp his monarchy and to unseat him, to literally overthrow him. So Shaul mobilizes literally his entire army to kill David HaMelech. David will not fight his father-in-law. But it's not just his father-in-law, it's David HaMelech's shita in life, which was an interesting one, that David HaMelech would not go to battle with family. He wouldn't do it with his father-in-law, he wouldn't do it with his son Avshalom, he just wouldn't do it. He just would not do it. So David HaMelech instead runs away, and he lives life as a fugitive for a good number of years. See, interestingly enough, one of the places, so if you take a look at number 3, Vayakam David vayivrach be'yom hu b'nei Shaul, vayovel el Achish melech Gat. So one of the places David HaMelech ran away into was the city of Gat. King of Gat was a man by the name of Achish. Vayomru avdi Achish, elav, halo zed David melech haaretz, halo azeh ya'anu b'mcholos lemor, hika shah ba'alafav, v'David b'rivivosav. So here's what happens. So Rashi actually points out, who lived in Gat? Goliath's brothers. So Goliath's brother in Gat, David HaMelech shows up in Gat. They say, wow, that guy looks a lot like the guy who killed our brother, like Goliath. And that looks like David HaMelech, the one who the Jewish people sing about, that he's such an incredible hero. David HaMelech realizes that they know his identity. So what does he do? Pasuk number 3, Pasuk Yedalid. Vayishanu es ta'amo be'einehem, vayisholel bayadam, vayas al daltos tashar, vayored ribra al zakano. David HaMelech does something amazing. He feigns insanity. He pretends like he's crazy. He pretends like he's insane. So what does he do? Again, literally, vayishanu es ta'amo. He changed his speech. He scribbled on the doors of the gate, and he drooled on his beard. So he literally acted like he was absolutely insane and out of his mind. So what happens? So take Pasuk Tesvav, Vayomer Achish el avadav, hine tiro ish mishtagea, lama taviu oso elai. So Achish says, this guy is a nut. He's insane. Why are you bringing him to me? And Achish says, Chaser mishugaimani is a great line, right? So Achish says, you think that I don't have enough mishugaim around me, right? I'm surrounded by mishugaim, so you think I need another mishugim over here? I don't need him here, right? Chaser mishugaim ki abesim hazel ishtageh alai yavo al beisi, right? Yavo. So again, so yavo. In other words, so it works. Achish is convinced this can't be David. This guy is crazy. He's insane. So David HaMelech goes ahead and saves his life by feigning insanity. So again, why is this important? Because the way the kapitel starts is that this kapitel took place, or David HaMelech penned this kapitel, was inspired by this kapitel with the entire episode that occurred in Gat. Now that I know that last piece, we could use that to actually translate or interpret the earlier phrase. So if you take a look at number 2, Yonas Elam Rechokim, what does this mean? Al Atzmo. So Rashi says the way to appreciate this phrase is as follows. Now, if we translate it, Yonas, how would you translate? Dove. So Elim Rechokim, what does that mean? Al Atzmo, Rashi says in number 2, Shahaya Rechok Me'eretz Yisrael, Eitzel Achish, Vayu Echav Shal Goyas Mevakshim Rishus Me'achish Lahargo, Shene'emar Halozeh David Melech Haaretz. So this is interesting. So Rashi explains, now I understand that this is taking place as a result of the episode in Gat. So now I want to translate the phrase, Lamatseach, I understand, Al Yonas Elim Rechokim. Rashi helps you with Rechokim. Rechokim means that David HaMelech says, I'm so far from home. Now the truth is, Gat is actually not so far from Eretz Yisrael proper, but sometimes you could be geographically close, but yet because of your emotional state, you feel so far away from anything and everything you know. So now I know Rechokim, I'm so far away. What's Yonas Elim? Skip to number 4, Rashi again says, and this is incredible, V'hu haya beinehem ki Yona ilames. David HaMelech felt like a mute dove. So Yonah is a dove, Elaim is mute. So now if we go back to number 1, we could look at the phrase, Lamnatseach, to the conductor, Al Yonas Elim Rechokim LeDavid, Michtam Be'echos Oso Plishtim Begas. I'm still not sure what to do with Michtam, I'll have to come back to that. But again, David HaMelech says, this is when I felt like a mute dove, so far away, when I was besieged by the Plishtim in Gat. Now again, if you go back to the morning for just a moment, and again, now you can begin to see the rest of the capital really falls into place. Chanini Elokim, Kisha Afani Enosh, Kal Yom Lochem Yelachatzeni. Literally translated, be gracious to me, O God, because men yearn to swallow me. All day long, the warrior oppresses me. And you could see, by the way, the theme of the rest of the capital is exactly this. David HaMelech saying, I feel so threatened, I feel so alone, I feel so vulnerable, I feel so in danger, but I believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you're going to take care of me. Fine, that's the capital. Again, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this capital, so we'll go through the subsequent psukim in next week. What I want to highlight to you something interesting. Lam Natseach to the conductor usually has a connotation of joy associated with it as well. Usually, not always, but often if David HaMelech is choosing a particular capital, ultimately to be sung in the Beis HaMikdash, Lam Natseach has an element of joy associated with it. And yet, when you look at this particular capital, you don't seem to see any element of joy. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's David HaMelech saying, I'm so down, I'm so broken, I'm so oppressed, I'm so depressed. Things are so incredibly difficult. Again, that lashon that David HaMelech uses of being swallowed up is so dramatic. If David HaMelech is using that lashon, and this is the emotional experience of this capital, why Lam Natseach? Why Lam Natseach? In other words, it's really two questions. Question number 1 is, where is there any element of joy? And question number 2 is, why did David HaMelech feel that this capital should be included in the Beis HaMikdash? Right? Why was it necessary to include this? So I want to show you something very interesting. If you take a look at number 5, so just going really, really off, out of Tehillim a little bit over here into the Chumash, not this week's parsha, but in Chumash Shmos. So the Torah tells us about the mitzvah of tefillin. And the Torah says, V'ayah lecha la'os al yadcha, u'lezikaron bein einecha, leman tiyeh toras Hashem beficha, ki b'yad chazaka otziacha Hashem mitzrayim. Okay, so very simply the Torah tells us, you have to put a sign on your hand, right, and a remembrance between your eyes, referring to the tefillin shayah, the tefillin that a man puts on his arm, the tefillin that a man puts on his head, and ultimately it's a reminder about Hashem and the fact that Hashem took us out of Egypt. Okay, take a look at number 6, another pasuk in Shmos, just a few psukim later. V'haya la'os al yadcha u'letotafos bein einecha. It should be a sign on your hand, and literally a sign between your eyes. Ki b'chozek yad hosian Hashem mitzrayim. Ultimately, that with a strong hand, Hashem took us out of Egypt. Incredible. Now the Zohar already points out something very interesting, which is if you look at number 6, if you were writing the word Yadcha in Hebrew, how would you write it? How would you write it? Yod, Dalid, Chaf Sofis, right? And the Chaf. That's how you would write it, right? That's how you would write it. But yet if you notice over here, how is it written? Yud, Dalid, Chaf, Hey. Which leads Rashi in number 8 to say as follows, that ultimately, again, Yadcha is a contraction. It's a contraction. Between which two words? Yad, Ke, Ha. The weaker hand. So we know this is the halacha, that a man puts his tefillin shel yad on his weaker hand. So if a person is right-handed, he wraps his arm tefillin, his tefillin shel yad, on his left hand. The person is left-handed, he wraps his tefillin on his right arm. This is the halacha. And all learned that, yadcha, yad keha. So it's interesting, if you take a look in the Be'er Parsha, he says something fascinating. He says, look in the number 9, right-hand paragraph, 4 lines in. My time amra Torah la'aniach tefillin al hayadayim, umadua daika al yad keya hasmalis. What a strange halacha. In other words, so just to illustrate what's happening over here. So the tefillin shel and tefillin shel rosh really represent a full sublimation of self to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The arm represents my physical prowess, right? The head, the mind represents my spiritual, emotional, and intellectual prowess. And what I'm doing is, I'm taking all of my strength and I'm wrapping it, I'm binding it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So why the weak arm? Why use the weak arm? In fact, again, I would have thought that in fact it would have been better to put it on the stronger arm, right? Doesn't that show ultimately, again, a complete sublimation of my full strength to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Yet we put the tefillin shel yad on the weaker arm. Why is that? And he says something so beautiful. He says, Ella, listen to this. This is such an amazing observation. Ella, kilo hari hayadayim hari aynai v'aznayim. The arms are really, the hands are different than the eyes and the ears. How so? Ki af shegam mehem yesh adam shtayim mikalev. Remember again, what's the common denominator between your eyes, your ears, and your arms, your hands? You have two. Okay. Mikol makom b'kocham u'pu'ulasim shavim hem. See, here's what's interesting. The natural state of your eyes is that they have the same vision. Okay, so sometimes it changes, but almost like the natural state is both of my eyes see the same. The natural state of my ears is that both my hearing is the same in both ears. Anything you have two of on the body, generally, again, it works the same. It works the same. And he says something amazing. Left-hand column. Your hearing in your left ear is the same as hearing in your right ear. The two eyes. Shavim heim. Ubazeh nishtanu hayadayim. Yet, the hands, the arms, are different. Why? Ki ikar pu'ulosav osa adam b'yad yamin, ve'ilu yado hasmolis yad kehahi. By definition, the arms, the hands, don't work in the same way. Such an interesting observation, right? And not everyone, there are ambidextrous people, but we'll call them, those are the exception, not the rule, right? People have a dominant hand, a dominant arm, and a weaker one. It's by design. It's by design. My eyes see the same, my ears see the same, but yet there's a dominant hand and a weak hand. And he goes on. So listen to how profound this is. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, when a person comes to put on tefillin, which represents a dveikos, a connecting of oneself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yinichu osam daika alayad hakeya. Put it on the weaker arm. Why? Lohoros ki daika me'achaloshim u'mizmani hanisyon v'achashecha sham hi ikar dveikos habore. This is so profound. It says the Be'er Parsha, the weaker arm represents the weaknesses in life. What are the weaknesses in life? It's the challenging times, the difficult times, adversity, those moments of incredibly profound weakness. So what does a Jew do in times of adversity, weakness, difficulty, and challenge? Those are the times that I go out of my way to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu even more. You see, to wrap the tefillin, to have a sense of devekos to Hashem with my strong arm, that's obvious and easy. That's obvious and easy, right? Of course, when times are good, when things are good, everything's going according to going to plan, everyone's happy with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when life is going as it should. When is the challenge in our relationship with Hashem? When does the challenge present itself? When there are hiccups in life, and hiccups is putting it mildly, when there's difficulty, adversity, impediments, challenges, hurdles, obstacles, then the relationship is challenged. So how do you deal with that? Now what the Bar Parasha says something so amazing. It's dafka in those weaker times in life that you have to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu even more. It's dafka in those challenging times, those times of the weaker arm, that you have to go out of your way to connect yourself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in even a stronger way. It's such an incredibly profound lesson, and that's why a man wraps tefillin on the weaker arm, to show that there are going to be weak moments in life. There are going to be challenges and difficulties in life. And in those moments, what's more important than anything else is that you establish a sense of devekos. You establish a sense of connection, beautiful relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that relationship is more important when you're in left-handed times, using the left as the weaker one, than when you are in right-handed times of goodness, beauty, and prosperity. Such an incredibly different way to look at the mitzvah. Now, why is this important for us? Because I think that's what's happening in this kapitel over here. What's really unfolding over here is, we're asked before, right? This kapitel is such a kapitel of adversity, right? Can you imagine, by the way, David HaMelech, just understand, David HaMelech, anointed by Shmuel, chosen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be king, and not just to be king, but to be the founder of a dynastic monarchy. David HaMelech, the father of the messianic line, finds himself alone in Gat. And the only thing he can do to save himself is what? Literally drool on himself. Literally drool on himself. Act like an insane individual, like he's out of his mind. What a low point in David HaMelech's life that must have been. Bad enough, yeah, my father-in-law is trying to kill me. A lot of people have that problem, right? I'm saying bad enough ultimately, again, that I have familial strife or other stuff. But like this, what has my life come to? So David HaMelech says, you'd be tempted to think that in moments like this, it's easy to say, Hashem has turned his back on me, and I'm going to reciprocate. I'm going to turn my back on him. But in fact, David HaMelech does just the opposite. In that moment when life became so exceedingly difficult, and his circumstances became so compromised, in that moment when life for David HaMelech had really become so incredibly terrible, what he did was, he doubled down on his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He made it stronger. He intensified it. He clung to HaKadosh Baruch Hu even more than he had before. You see, what this kapitel is describing is one of those left-handed moments in life. One of those moments of profound, and isn't it incredible? You see, when things don't go according to plan, what we do is we question. And that's okay, by the way. It's okay to question. And it's okay to doubt. And it's okay to wonder. Remember, I want to point out, even David HaMelech, who's doubling down over here on Emunah, is the same David HaMelech who writes, Keli lama azaftani. Right? So remember, again, there are different stages in life. But how do you deal with adversity? So the way you deal with adversity, David HaMelech says, is when I am in those left-handed moments in life, that's when I need Hashem even more. But one second, that's so counterintuitive. Because when I'm in difficult moments of life, maybe I'm angry with Hashem. Maybe I'm disappointed with Hashem. Maybe I'm disillusioned with Hashem. Why did you do this to me? Why did you put me here? All good questions. But David HaMelech, I'm just telling you, when you're in a bad place in life, a left-handed moment in life, that's when you need Hashem even more. And that's when you have to struggle to solidify the relationship even more. That's what's happening in this capital. That's Lam Natseach. That's what David HaMelech is saying over here, Lam Natseach. This capital, this needs to be sung by the Levitic choir in the Beis HaMikdash. Do you know why? Because this capital is the roadmap for navigating the left-handed moments of adversity in life. What do you do in life? Al Yonas Elim Rechokim LeDavid. What do you do in life when you feel like David HaMelech and you feel like a mute dove that is so far away from home because life has clearly not gone your way and things have gone so sideways and nothing's turning out the way that you wanted it to be? What do you do in those moments? What do you do when you feel like David Be'echoz also plishtim begat? What do you do? And look at the next words. Chaneni Elokim. The thing you do, double down, bolster your relationship even more. And it's hard. Why is it hard? Let's suppose just because it's important to be honest. It's hard because in those moments when I feel like a muted dove so far away from home, in those moments where I feel encircled by the Philistines of life in Gat so far away, I'm angry at HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I feel distant from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But yet, how do you go ahead and deal with being angry at God and distant from God? What do? You put more effort into building a relationship. You put more effort into building a relationship. That's when now I realize, okay, I'm upset. I feel a little bit disillusioned, but I also know that I need you now more than ever. I'm going to double down. Chaneni Hashem. Chaneni Elokim. Ultimately, again, David HaMelech feels so far away, the muted dove, I need you even more. And this creates, I think, an incredible paradigm for life. Because don't we all experience this at different times? And again, we all experience disappointment, disillusionment, failure, adversity. It's only a question of how intense it is, but we all have it. And we all have those moments where we feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should have come through for us in a different kind of way. And that's okay. We think we understand the world. We don't understand the world. We think we understand how our life is supposed to go. We don't understand how our life is supposed to go. So we have those moments of disillusionment. So what do you do? What do you do? And it's so tempting to pull back. So tempting to pull back. It's so tempting to create a distance. But no. David HaMelech says it's dafka in those moments where you need HaKadosh Baruch Hu even more. So figure out what you need to do to come closer. Figure out what you need to do in order to go ahead and bolster that bond. Figure out what you need to do in order to create even a heightened sense of Devegos. And I'll share with you an incredible example of this. I didn't put this on the sheet. We'll do this outside. So there was a great tzaddik named Rav Yaakov Yehoshua Falk. Rav Yaakov Yehoshua Falk lived from 1680 to 1756. He was born in Krakow, Poland. He was a Rav in a number of different cities, including Lemberg and Berlin. Rav Yaakov Yehoshua Falk is most famous for his sefer, the Pnei Yoshua. Pnei Yoshua is like a staple for anyone learning Gemara. Necessary sefer. You'll find in any yeshiva, right? Pnei Yoshua, one of the greatest fun. In the introduction to the Pnei Yoshua, he tells a story. The Mechaber, the author of Rav Falk, tells a story about how he came to write this sefer. So listen to this. He describes an event that occurred in 1702. 1702. So you have to, right? So it's 1702, and amazingly enough, pretty much, about 220 years ago. Almost 220 years ago to the day. Listen to this. Yom Gimel Kislev. It happened to me in the year 1702 on the 3rd of Kislev. So pretty much like 220 years ago, right? Almost exactly, right? When is Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh is tomorrow night, right? Tomorrow night, Thursday, Friday. So again, Gimel Kislev 1702. So almost exactly 220 years ago. He was a Rav in the city. He wasn't a Rav. He might have been the Rav. Yeah, he was a Rav. No, he wasn't a Rav. He was a Rebbe. He had a base madrash in the city of Lvov. Okay, listen to this. Shalev hayisi bebesi. V'ra'anon behechalim chaverim v'talmidim makshivim koli. So Rav Falk writes, my life was perfect. It's incredible. You don't hear that often. My life was perfect. I had a beis medrash. I had talmidim. I was giving shir. I had friends. I had family. Life was perfect. Upesa pitom. Then suddenly on the 3rd of Kislev in 1702, Haisa me'ir legalafucha kimoraga. My entire city was turned to rubble in a matter of moments. What happened? He quotes over here, Umara isha gedola hamislakachas asher ala b'aman osenu b'chalonenu. So what happens? To tell you this outside, the government was storing gunpowder in one of the storefronts. Somehow the gunpowder ignited and caused massive explosions throughout the entire it was an accident, throughout the entire Jewish neighborhood in Lvov. Leveled multiple buildings, killed hundreds of people on that day. He goes on, he says, Ad shenersu abatim o megorasam kamabatim gidolim, houses came down, buildings came down, the entire city ultimately again was turned upside down. Listen to what Falk writes. B'socha chalalim, amongst the people who were killed, Gamkein magare beisi zu ishti, v'ima v'avi'ima. So my wife died in the explosion. Her parents died in the explosion. Her grandmother died in the explosion. Ad shegia gamkein letzaras habat, biti haketana gittel. My little baby Gittel, my daughter, died in the explosion as well. So you have to understand what happened over here. In the morning of Gimel Kislev, Rav Falk said, my life is perfect. My life is perfect. Explosion happens in a matter of moments. He loses his entire family. His daughter's gone, his wife is gone, his in-laws are gone, his wife's son, everyone's gone. Everyone's gone. So look what he writes. What happened to Rav Falk? Rav Falk, the Pnei Yoshua, was stuck under rubble. He was buried alive under rubble. Probably under rubble. So what happens? He goes, he said, I couldn't breathe. There was so much rubble on top of me that I had difficulty breathing. Amarti, nigzarti bedami me'elcha, pakarati yasashnosi. He goes on, he says, he's talking about the conversation that he's having with HaKadosh Baruch Hu while he's buried underneath the rubble, right? So again, I don't know that he knows, like when he's buried underneath the rubble, I don't know that he knew that his wife was dead and that his daughter was dead. I don't know what he knew, but he also knew that this was the end. This was the end of the road. As amarti odena b'soch hagal. He said, while I was trapped under the rubble, I said, Im Elokim imadi, votzi'eni min hamakom hazeh l'shalom. Hashem, if you save me, I lost my wife, I lost my daughter, I lost my family, but if you allow me to somehow escape this, v'yivne li bayis nama laharbos kivuli b'talmidim, I will rededicate myself to building Talmidei Chachamim. Lo emna atzmi v'koltei beis hamedrash v'lishkol al dal se'ayim b'shugis hashas. I will make sure to rededicate myself to learn. And ultimately, again, I will write Sfarim in order to facilitate the learning of other people. The learning of other people. So this was the Kabbalah. This was the neder, so to speak, the vow that Rav Falk took while he's underneath the rubble. Ani terem achalele deber dvar malibi. So he's saying, I couldn't even say this out loud because I couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe. So he's saying, as soon as I finished saying these things in my heart, Shama Hashem bekolani v'nasan mahalchim bein amudin kimin shivil mamish nasali. It says, right after I made this promise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I was saved from the rubble. People heard me, they cleared a path, and I was able to get out from the rubble. The truth is, there's much more in the introduction that's even more dramatic. But why am I sharing it with you? Because to me, this story it's tragic, it's overwhelming, and it's inspiring all at the same time. Because it's an incredible metaphor for life. So often we get trapped under the rubble, the metaphoric rubble, right? It happens that I'm living my life, I'm doing my thing, Everything is going according to the way I think it's supposed to go according. And then the buildings collapse, the life edifice collapses, things are imploding, and things are not going well. Things are not going well. And I feel like mamish, like the life being squeezed out of me. So what do? What do I do in those moments? So again, sometimes I say to myself, well, 1 second, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're the one who brought the rubble down on me, right? You're the one who did all this on me. So like, I'm a shtickle bragis, right? I'm like a little bit upset. I'm a little bit hurt. And I'm a little bit disdainful of why it is. Now again, the problem is that thought and that approach gets you nowhere. Instead, what my job is to do, as difficult as the situation is, the only way for me to get out of the rubble is with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help. I can't get out of the rubble by myself. I can never get out of the rubble by myself. But with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help, I can extricate myself from anything. So when buried under the rubble of life, Pnei Yoshua tells us, that's the time to rededicate yourself to creating a relationship with Hashem. That's the time to double down. That's the time to recommit. That's the time to build. That's the time to bolster. But again, Pnei Yoshua was not the first one to teach us this lesson. This is what David HaMelech is teaching us in the beginning of Kapitel Nun Vav, the beginning of chapter 56. There are times in life when I'm buried under rubble. There are times in life that I feel like the mute dove. There are times in life that I feel so alienated and so far away from the life I wanted and I thought I would have. In those moments, the thing that is key to life success is doubling down, bolstering, building, and growing my relationship with Hashem. Now, how we do that and what we need to do, that's much more personal. And that's much more subjective, depending on what my particular life circumstance is. But this, says David HaMelech, this, says the Pnei Yoshua, is the blueprint for success in life. And this is why David HaMelech wanted this kapitel sung in the Beis HaMikdash. Because we all have moments of being buried under the rubble. And we all have times when we feel exiled, ultimately again to God. And it's in those moments where even if we feel a little bit upset, a little bit disenfranchised, and maybe even a little bit betrayed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the same time, I also recognize that it's now more than ever that I need Him. And I have to reach deep within myself to figure out how could I strengthen the relationship, how could I build the relationship, how could I bolster the relationship? Because if I could do that, I'll get out of my exile from God back to my promised land of Eretz Yisrael. If I could do that, I'll pull my way out of the rubble. We'll stop over here for tonight. We will pick up in Meretz Hashem. We're going to spend one more week on Kapitel Nun Vav next week. And then I think that's going to bring us close to Hanukkah. I think within Hanukkah. I think within 2 weeks. We're going to spend a week or two before Hanukkah, Meretz Hashem, focusing on Hanukkah. But again, next week in Meretz Hashem, Kapitel Nun Vav. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.